Hello everybody, my name is BaLLHaWK. How are you doing today? Welcome to the first installment of the DLC how-to series. We are starting it off with the basics, taking you back to Formulas 101. What is the DLC, you may be asking? For those of you that are not familiar with it or are not in the DLC is a small Discord server comprised of a group of league owners from big and small leagues across the community, all sharing resources, experiences, opinions, tips, tricks, knowledge amongst each other to help better the draft league community and their leagues as a whole. It is there to be just a resource for league owners, and to help not only seasoned veterans that have been running their leagues for a long time, but also aspiring league owners that are looking to start one up and don't really know where to start. This is, like I mentioned, this is going to be the first installment of the how-to series. Just give a little bit of an outline. We're starting off with Sheets 101 here, or Formulas 101, and basically what that's going to be is it's going to be me going over the set of formulas that I have found to be the most useful over my past year of playing around and really messing around with Google Sheets. So take it with a grain of salt. This isn't an official list, but I do think it's one that's, if you were going to start creating an automated draft league document, these would probably be the most helpful formulas for you to use, in my opinion. I have a goal to create a league doc template series where we'll be starting from a blank Google Sheet and be building it from the ground up, and each iteration of the video will add a new function or slide or tab to the base sheet, and with each series the finished product up until the end of that episode will be pinned at the bottom or in the description of that series, and then by the end there will be a fully functioning working draft league document that you can take and run with and use for your league and edit and change it to your liking. There will maybe be a document debugging video series where if something that you see in your document isn't working the way you think, you can highlight some thought processes on how to drill down to the source of the error. There is a bot management video series that I'm looking to put together as far as like how to set up the Porygon bot. Harbor has done a great job with that bot, and he's got a good how-to manual. It might be helpful to see somebody do it, do it in front of you with the video. So maybe we'll cover something like that. Maybe the Dino bot, the Carl bot, getting perms made or carried out, permissions management, setting up self-reaction roles, all that jazz. So there are lots of how-to videos to come along. This will probably be the longest installment of the entire series, just because there's a lot of base information in this one that I think it's a good foundational starting block for the how-to series itself. So this will likely be the longest video in the series, and the rest of them will be kind of short snippets as they roll out. This video will be bookmarked in the description below, so if you see a section that you would like to skip ahead to, feel free to do so now. My qualifications kind of speak for themselves, I think. I knew nothing of Google Sheets before April 1st, 2020. Around that time, I had just quit my job and moved states in the beginning of the pandemic that we have all become very familiar with. So I had a lot of time on my hands, and Draft League was quickly becoming my favorite hobby, and creating Google Sheets was kind of a byproduct of that scenario. So I started off in draft leagues by becoming a replacement in my very first league, and then from there I branched out and joined other leagues where I started from the beginning and finally got to make my own draft. And then from there I kind of started becoming more familiar with management and how leagues that run well are run, and things to avoid for leagues that have not been run well. And I started becoming a moderator in a few servers, and eventually I was handed the keys to my very own server, where the owner stepped down and relinquished control to me. and that server is now the Skypillar Stadium. That is my very own draft league, the league that I own and run, and it kind of gives me a little bit more credibility for the DLC and for these videos. So if you're not familiar with the Skypillar Stadium, it's just a community-driven draft league, and I think it's fairly well run, if I do say so myself. I am completely self-taught with these, and I think that's probably the best way to really get an understanding for how things work. A lot of times when you're self-taught, you have had to reverse engineer a lot of things, and what I mean by that is you see a finished product of something that you're aiming to build, and you have to dive and dig into it to figure out each individual piece and how it works and try to recreate it on your own. Doing that, it kind of gives you an appreciation for how things are made, some mistakes that, or some not mistakes, but like some things that may have not been created the most efficient in that finished product that you're looking at, and it gives you ideas for how to make things better. So I'm completely self-taught with Google Sheets. I did not take a class. I did not have any previous training. It's just been my own hobby, my own putting my own time in. I find it very enjoyable to brainstorm on my projects that I've created in Google Sheets and think of, how can I make this better, or how can I use this formula in a different way, or how can I make this more efficient? How can I make this the code in this document work faster so there's not as much lag time for the end user? A lot of that stuff kind of drives me to learn more about Google Sheets, and I think that's a pretty I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but I think it kind of speaks to my understanding for Google Sheets, and I think you can trust me when I speak about these things. I know what I'm talking about, and that kind of leads me to the viewpoint that I think doc creation is or Google Sheets, League, Documents, Docs. There's lots of names for them, but I think it's somewhat of an art form. I'm sure we've all seen League documents that aren't necessarily pleasing to the eyes, or they're hard to look at, or they're clunky, or they're slow, and it kind of brings down the overall enjoyment that you've had in that league. And then on the flip side, we've all seen documents that, or I hope so anyway, that have they're clean, they're visually pleasing to look at, and they run efficiently. Not only do docs like that, not only are they good or fun to look at just because they look good, but they increase the overall enjoyment of the moderators, the owner, and the league participants, because things tend to get updated faster, updated smoother, less errors, and it just it becomes something that the league can depend upon to always be there and always be correct. Another piece that speaks to my qualifications is I am the creator of the Team Hawk Battle Prep Doc. I'm not bringing that up to be a plug of any sorts. I'm just bringing it up to kind of illustrate my skill set, or my resume for knowing what I'm talking about with Google Sheets. If anybody has gotten a copy of that themselves, feel free to tear it apart one of these days and really dive in to see what is all being put into that. It's a lot. I think I spent easily over 100 hours on that, just kind of creating it, refining it, rebuilding it, tearing it down, building it again, trying to find the most efficient way to jam as much information in there as I can without making it too clunky for the end user. So again, it's not a plug, it's more of evidence for my skill set and why I am a qualified source for you to listen to, and take the information that I present in front of you in this video to heart and be able to trust it. And then the last bit of my qualifications is, as I mentioned, I am the owner of the Skypillar Stadium. So I am a league owner. I do know, I'm familiar with managing a lot of different personalities and groups and permissions and a large group of people. So, take that all with a grain of salt. Use this video how you like. I think it's a good foundational piece to get you familiar with how to use Google Sheets. And let me know what you think. Let me know if there's anything that you'd like to see added upon in the future, or any improvements that I can make to this video. And I hope you get some. I hope this video ends up giving you some useful information that you can use in your league doc creation in the future, or just Google Sheets in general. So the way that this video is going to be broken down, The formulas that I will cover are highlighted here on the left, and they're broken up into subcategories, and some of them are paired together because I think that they work better together than they do on their own, or they're similar. And whenever a function or formula here has a formula, you'll be able to see it at the top. You'll see all the individual parameters that go into it. We'll talk about it, define them, and then I'll give you a short example of how each one can be used to help reinforce your understanding for the formula. My goal for this is to present a product in front of you that allows you to walk into this video without knowing any of these functions and be able to walk out with and rewatch it, take it step by step to be able to know how each one of these formulas works inside and out, so you can better use them and use them properly in your documents. So we'll get started with the index and match functions. This is the formula. The index has the overall goal to get you a specific cell's information. So the formula itself is asking for a reference, which is basically just the group of cells that you want to that your information resides in without necessarily being specific. So for intents and purposes of this video, we'll say that this whole group over here, this is going to be my reference, and you'll see this a lot in this video. I'm going to use this little chunk as my example, my playground, if you will, for this video. So this is going to be my reference, and then it's going to ask for a row and a column. These are optional. Anytime you see a square bracket in the formula, those are optional. They don't need to be there for the formula to work. They have defaults. I don't know exactly what all the defaults are for all of them off the top of my head, and I did not highlight them in this sheet, but they are very easily displayed when you go to type in the formula. There's also a more help function where you can click on to get more information about each formula as you go. But the index, it's meant to pick a precise cell from a reference based on criteria you give it for the row and the column. So it seems rather bland on its own, but when you include the match function, it becomes one of the most powerful lookup formulas that you can use for a Google Sheet. So what the match does is you give it a search key, you give it a range, which is usually just a single, well, not usually, it is just a single array, a 1D array of data. So that could be either a row or a column, one-dimensional, meaning just one, and then you give it a search type. So again, the search key is the value you're looking for, the range is your single row or column, the search type, it can be exact or not exact. So what that means by exact or not exact. So I had to do a little bit of homework on that one because I'm used to just saying 0 or false for this, because it's a true or false value, or 0 or 1. What it means is if you're looking for an exact match, you're looking for through the entire reference or the entire range of data for that exact match. If it's not exact, what it means is is your data sorted. So if your data is sorted from greatest to least, it'll go from top to bottom, and let's say you're looking for 5 and your data is sorted from 1 to 10, or from 1 to 15, and let's say you've got 15, ahead of 5, it'll pull 15 because it found the 5 in there. But if you got exact, it'll look for only the 5, and it'll return you only the 5. And the thing about the match is it doesn't return you that value inside that cell. It returns you the index that cell resides in within the range that you specify. So when you pair that with the index, you can use it as a lookup, a very flexible lookup. And I will show you right now. So let's say, for example, I want to find the sprite for Blastoise, and I've got this list of Pokemon because it's on my draft board where you typically have a list sort of like this underneath a specific value. So I want to find the sprite for Blastoise. what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it this entire range as the reference, and I'm going to find this Blastoise black and white sprite. So we're going to start off by entering our index formula equals index. Now, a lot of times you'll see this little question mark. What that means is you can expand it to get basically the formula and the meaning for each parameter. You can minimize it so it just shows the formula, or you can exit out so you don't see it at all. But you can always get it back by pressing the question mark there. So we're going to keep it just so it's showing the formula so we know we can track where we are in the formula and see where we're at. So we're going to give it our reference from Bulbasaur over to the Gmax Blastoise sprite. We're going to comment and move on to our next parameter. We're going to give it the row. So this is where we use the match function. So now I'm going to type in my match formula. We're going to give it a search key. Now the reason why this is so powerful is because you can automate this and basically expand it for an entire region or section. I'll explain you that a little bit more after I get this formula written out. So our search key, the value that we want to search for, is going to be, we're going to search for Blastoise. Okay, and you'll see why in a second. So we're going to search for Blastoise. We're going to use that cell as our reference, and what that'll do is it won't tell you to search for A12. It'll tell the match function to search for the value inside of A12. We're going to comma our range. We're inside of the index formula. We're inside the row parameter. So we're searching for Blastoise in this row of data here because we're just trying to find the row number that all of our data is. Think of each one of these rows as a single piece of information. We're trying to look at where in this range from 0 to Blastoise Gmax, which row our data that we want is in. So we're going to tell it this range, and search type, we want to find the exact. So you can leave it blank, or you can say false, or you can say 0. A lot of times I do 0. I don't know, it's just more comfortable for me. So that's our row. Now we're going to go column. So now column, the reason the column can always be a non-changing parameter the way that we had this set up because our data is the data in the columns is always going to be the same type. It's always the column Pokemon name is always going to have the names. Sprite number is always going to have the number. The sprite column is always going to have the image. So that's why the column in this instance is just a index of which type we want here. The reason why we had to do the match function for the row is because each row isn't broken up into a single type. Like this whole row isn't just like just the name Charizard, or it's not just a name. Like some of these are numbers of the black white sprite, the home number. Some of them are links, some of them are images. They're not the same type. So with column, we can just specify the index number of the column that our desired data resides in. So it starts from 1. So we're going to count off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. We're going to enter 9. We're going to close our parentheses because that's the function, or that's the end of the formula, and we're going to press enter. And you can't see it now because the formatting, but there you go. There is our, the way that the image is laid out, it's kind of hard to see, but that's our Blastoise sprite. So now, the reason why this is so powerful is because you can set this up so that on your draft board, you can run, once you get the first one set up, you can select a cell, see this little square down here, you can select it and drag it down, and then it ultimately just fills it in for the rest below. So that is the index match function. Now this is something that you can expand upon. It doesn't always have to be a sprite. It could be, you're looking for a specific piece of information about a type. Let's say you have your coaches, your list of coaches for your league, and you have them separated by time zone, showdown name, team name, abbreviation, logo. You can use this type of example to search for the coach name inside this reference and then return the logo of that coach. or return the time zone of that coach. So whenever there's something that it doesn't always, it's not always obvious, you know, which column or row something is in, but the data that you want is within a range of cells that can be parsable. The index match function is a very efficient, very powerful way to look up for your data. Next, we're going to move on to the Vlookup and the Hlookup. These two are very similar, and that's why they're grouped together. The only difference is one is searching through a range vertically, and the other is searching through a range horizontally. The search key is the value that you're looking for, that you're searching for a match with, very similar to the match function. The range is the range of cells that you are looking through. So again, very similar to the index function. This is our range in this instance. The index is the number of columns over that your data resides in, or for the Hlookup, it would be the number of rows down that your data resides in. And your is sorted. Basically the same thing that I mentioned about your match. It's referring to, can it find the first one that it finds a match for? As in, like, if you're looking for Venusaur and you have Venusaur, Mega Venusaur, Venusaur Gmax, is your data sorted? Is the Venusaur you're looking for sorted so that the first one is Mega Venusaur? All right, your data is sorted. So then it's only going to grab the first one that it finds. If it's not, then it's going to find the exact match. So very similar to the match formula there. Now, the first, so I have a couple of little keys here, little asterisks. So the first one is only the first column or row is searched for a match with your search key. What that means is, for Vlookup, when I highlight this whole cell, the search key is only being searched for in this first column. For the Hlookup, the search key is only being searched for in the first row specified within the range. And I'll show you a couple of tips of how you can manipulate this range later on, a couple slides from now. The 1 is the index number. So again, that is talking about the number of, for Vlookup, it's talking about the number of columns over that your desired data is from the reference column. So like in our last example, it was 9 because our first column in the range is the Pokemon name, and our black-white sprite that we desire is 9 columns over from that Pokemon name. And very similar for the exact same for Hlookup, just for rows starting from the top going to the bottom. So we're gonna recreate our last example that we did with the index match using the Vlookup. So we'll enter in our formula, select our search key, comma, select our range, comma, and select our insert our index number, which is 9, and our data is not sorted, so we're going to say false. Hit enter, and again, there is our sprite. And just like we did with the index match, you can go ahead and expand upon, drag it down and you have a list. Now, one thing that I didn't touch on in the last formula that I feel like should probably be mentioned is the importance of the $sign. The $sign is money in formulas. What does the $sign do? It locks up ranges. So let's see here. Let's recreate this example. So we're gonna say our range is Blastoise. Oops. Or our desired values are Blastoise, Bulbasaur, Blastoise, Gmax, Charizard, Ivysaur. Oops. Now we're going to expand this formula to give us all these sprites below, just like we did last time. Except more than half of these don't work. Now, the reason for that is we didn't lock any of these ranges. So, well, and this one's probably got an extra space in here. Yep. Okay, so the reason why Bulbasaur and Ivysaur didn't show up is because we didn't lock our ranges. And that's where the $ comes in. So whenever you have a range, and I'll call it a naked range, whenever you have a naked range here, which is just the bare bones range, if you expand upon it like I did, you drag it down, the reference in here will also move down. So let's say I moved this from B17 all the way down to B21. That was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cells. So this G2 is going to turn into a G7 or a G6. You know, it's going to move down as many cells as you drag down. So as you can see, it moved to G6. Now, a lot of times you want that to happen. So for this reference cell, you do want that functionality because you want to be able to drag it down and have it always look to the cell to the left. So that's good in some cases. However, when you're talking about a reference that your data is looking through, you always want that to look at the same reference, just to be consistent so you don't have any errors like this. So the way to fix this is convert your naked range into a covered range, a locked range, just like that. And then you can drag it down, and it'll always be looking at the same range. Now, a couple of caveats with this is you could choose to only lock the row or the column reference, the letters, and that'll allow you to drag things to the right or to the left without affecting your reference rows or your reference columns. Or you could choose to only lock the number, which would lock your rows, meaning you wouldn't ever look, you know, if your reference is specified to row 2, it'll always be row 2. The column could change, but the row will always stay the same. If you want to have the exact reference locked in, you want to cover up your row or your column and your row references for both sides of the reference here. I believe that covers the Hlookup and Vlookup and the $. Well, let's move on to Indirect. Indirect is a new, a pretty unexplored function that I found fairly recently, and it really kind of opens up a lot of doors in terms of automating your document and making it more efficient. What it does is it allows you to specify a range based on a string. So what I mean by that is when you select this range, you're basically creating a link for G2 to O17. But what I could do instead is I could type out G2 to O17, and when I hit enter, that doesn't mean anything right now, and I did 0 instead of O. That doesn't mean anything right now. But if I use the indirect, then that converts that string. If it's a valid range, it makes that range. So we're going to use our Vlookup formula again, but use the indirect to show what I mean. So we'll type in our formula equals Vlookup. We're going to type in our search key, comma. I'm going to go indirect. Instead of highlighting that range over there, I'm just going to click this cell inside of our indirect. Our index is 9, and is sorted is false. Hit enter. Oops. And there we go. Now I could change this so it only says 12, and what that would do is it would render this sprite an error because 12 doesn't go down to Blastoise. So as you can see, you know, you can kind of see like a little bit like why that's such an important thing. So you could have a bunch of different formulas that are parsing through a larger set of data to help, you know, pinpoint, you know, what category you want this data to come from without actually having the reference set up. or linked in there. So it provides a lot of variability with your formula, and sometimes that's a pretty powerful thing. Next, well, and inversely, you could, there's another thing that you could do that I learned, that you could select this, and let's go up to data, let's create a named range. So what a named range is allows you to apply a text label to a range of cells. So let's say I want this to be my dex, my Pokédex, we'll just call it dex. I've got my range highlighted. That range will now be labeled as dex. So when I come into here, I can just type out dex, and it still does the same thing. There's no DEX cell range in here, but the text dex refers to this range of cells here. So let's call it link. Now it doesn't work, but if I come over here and I change the name of this cell or of this range to link, I'd probably have to reinitialize the formula again. Maybe not. Did I put a space in there? Let's just go back to dex. How about that? And better. Long story short, I'm probably missing some reference, but for time's sake, I'm gonna move on. You can kind of start to see the power of the indirect and why that's a pretty powerful tool. Next up, we've got our arrays, and these are pretty cool because they allow you to manipulate your lookup ranges, and they allow you to simply display a set of cells that you want to be shown on a different tab. So where this might be helpful, where I use this a lot is when I have standings sorted in my bookkeeping or my data tab, and I simply just want to display that group of cells instead of resort it into my page instead of using the sort function. I could just simply show the array that exists there already, that's already sorted, and it's a quick and easy and efficient way to do it. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. So I'm going to use this example here. Oh, one more thing. The definition: an array is a table consisting of rows and columns of values. You can use commas inside the array to distinguish columns, and you can use the semicolon to distinguish rows. So I'll illustrate what I mean by that. We're just going to do a basic array here. So we'll show the array of this range, this 1D array, hit enter, boom. It simply displays the data that's inside of that 1D range, in 1D array. Now I'm gonna space this over there, give myself some room here. Let's display the sprite, the icon next to the name there. Now using separating the two 1D arrays by the comma. So our formula equals squiggly line. Squiggly lines are what define an array. Not a parentheses, that has to be the squiggly bracket. So we're going to highlight our names, comma. Now we're going to highlight the range that we want for our second column. I want these icons here. We're going to close the array and hit enter. Boom. Now let's say I want to pick and choose what data I want in my array, and I want to be able to stack it into one column. So we'll go ahead and hit our squiggly bracket, and we'll highlight Bulbasaur, Venusaur, and I want to jump down to the Squirtle line. Then I want to jump back up to the Charmander, Charizard line. Bulbasaur, Ivysaur, Venusaur, Squirtle, Wartortle, Blastoise, Wartortle, Charmander, Charmeleon, and Charizard. Let's add on to that. Now let's see if we can combine both of these to create this with our mismatched range there. So we're going to add in our semicolon, come over here and highlight those guys, comma. Now we're going to highlight these, comma. And now we're going to highlight those. Close the, keep the bracket closed there. That does not work. Why doesn't it work? Why does an array literal was missing values for one or more rows. Huh. I'm not entirely sure what that means. So maybe if I add a squiggly bracket there, add a squiggly bracket there, that's our column 1, comma, squiggly bracket there, squiggly bracket there, and I was using commas instead of semicolons. So that was another mistake. There we go. Now let's see, I'm curious because now that I got it separated correctly, I wonder if it will work now. It will not. So, one thing to note, if you want to use this to create a complex array like that, you have to, if you want to compound them a little bit, you have to include all your rows with all your columns kind of like that and have them act as their own separate arrays. So those are arrays, and so a lot of times this can be used to manipulate your reference cell range that you want to use to look up your data. So I'll make an example of that right now using the Vlookup. So we'll type in our Vlookup equation. Our search key is going to be Bulbasaur. Our range, this is where we're going to use arrays. Our range is going to be the Pokemon name, comma, the Pokemon icon, close that. Now that's our range. It's an array. Now Google does this weird thing where whenever I do this, it moves the indication of where you are in the formula back one. Don't let that confuse you. This was the search key. This was our range, comma. Now we are into the index, not the range. So our index is going to be 2 now, not 9, because we essentially cut out this chunk of the reference. So it's only 2 columns in our reference range now, and is sorted as false. Hit enter. There's our icon. Now we can come up here and cover up this range. Oops, didn't want to do that. Cover up this range here. So now what we can do is we can highlight the cell and drag it down, and there are all of our sprites. Moving on to the Countif. Countif is there to basically just count if your range of cells meets a certain criterion that you specify. So the range is the overall selection of cells that you want to search through, and the criterion is a rule that your data must abide by in order to be counted. So I created this little subset here, this little subset of data, and I'm going to use this to count the kills for only Bulbasaur, not Charmander or Squirtle. So we're going to type in our equation here, count if my range is the kills here, comma, criterion, if this range is equal to Bulbasaur. Now that should work, right? It didn't. So let's go and find out why. Debugging live. Let's see here. My equation. Criterion, the range that is testing as criterion, the pattern or test to apply to the range. So I got this confused when I explained this. I explained it like it was the Sumif. So this is a count if, so it's only counting the criterion in that range. So it's not a Sumif. So let's rewrite this formula again. This equals Countif. We're just going to count the amount of BaLLHaWKs in this range. So I guess let's highlight this whole range right here, just to make it interesting. Comma. And I want to count it only if it's equal to BaLLHaWK. And that returns the result of 2 because we have a BaLLHaWK up here and a BaLLHaWK down there. So that's the Countif. Let's say you want to count the amount of free agents somebody has used, and you have a list of free agent types. So you could have a column dedicated to the type of free agents, and you only want to subtract from somebody's given free agent points only if it meets the free agent type of transaction. You could have a code that represents that free agent type and count only if that type of free agent or transaction was created, and then it'll count against their total. So that's the Countif. Moving on to the Sumif. This is the this is what I was trying to display in the last example. Sumif is very similar to the Countif, but it has a little bit more to it. Your range is the overall selection of cells that you would like to search through. The typo. Get rid of that T there. Criterion is the rule that your data must abide by to be counted. Those first two are working exactly like the Countif. And then added on your sum range. Sum range is the range of cells that you want to actually be counted. So the way this will work is you give it a range. Here, let's say Bulbasaur, Charmander, Squirtle. I guess let's just act it out. Let's write it out. So the way this works is you highlight the range that you want to test against your criterion. You specify your criterion, and then if it's a match, like if this reference abides by that rule, it'll give it an index, and we'll specify our sum range, the range that we want to be summed up. As it's running down here, if it finds a set of data that abides by the rule, it'll basically look at that row or the index of that data within the range of the sum range that you specify, and it'll only sum up those cells. So now we get the 1 for BaLLHaWK's kills. Now let's say I change this. I could change this to make it a reference cell. Let's say Squirtle up there. Come down here, and I want, instead of specifying a hard-coded text, I want it to refer to a cell that can be changed. Now it's counting up the amount of kills for Squirtle. So you can see how that can be helpful if you're trying to sum up the amount of kills through a range of game results for a certain Pokemon in your league. Moving on to the Arrayformula. Now this is something that was brought about to me, or at least my eyes were opened to, by Autumn, and something that I was very unfamiliar with before, but has kind of taken my docs to the next level in terms of manageability and efficiency. For whatever reason, neither of us can really explain, or at least the last time I talked to her about it, neither of us can really explain why this is the case, but if you use an Arrayformula with a Vlookup and you specify a range of cells that you want it to work for using the Arrayformula, it's much faster, much more efficient than just having multiple Vlookups, and that's kind of counterintuitive because when I was doing some research with these lookup formulas, it's much quicker to specify individual lookups than a large group of, let's say, index match. But for whatever reason, with Arrayformulas and Vlookups, that's not the case. It's actually the opposite. So, what are Arrayformulas? Arrayformulas are defined as this, where normal formulas output a single value, an Arrayformula can output a range of values. So with that, we are going to display only the sprites for all of these with just one formula. How are we going to do that? I'll show you. I'm going to type in our Vlookup. let's highlight the formula here. Our search key, we're going to use BaLLHaWK. Our range, that's our range. Our index, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You know what? Let's change this up. We learned about arrays a little bit ago. Let's use them. Our range is the first column that we're looking up through, comma. Second column is the column that we want our data to come from, or our result to come from. Close the array. Let's leave it naked for now. Let's leave that range naked. That is our range. Now our index, instead of being 8, now it's going to be 2 because there's only 2 rows or 2 columns in our range. And is sorted is false. So right now, we've only specified one search key, so it's only going to return the BaLLHaWK. But now, just kind of get this group of cells ready here. Now this is where the magic of Arrayformulas come in. Let's change our search key. Instead of just being a singular cell, let's make it this entire reference, this entire column here, because this is the whole column that we want the sprite for. Now I'll press enter. It's only going to return 1 from that. Now, how it chooses the one that it returns, I'm not sure. I'm not sure why it decided to just go with Gmax Charizard. It could be a alphabetical thing, which actually wouldn't make sense because B comes before C. So I'm not sure why I chose Charizard Gmax. But now, so with the search key, and it only works with the search key and the Vlookup and Hlookup. This does not work with the index match combo, and this is kind of where the Vlookup sets itself apart from that powerful combo. Like the array formula with the Vlookup and the individual match index combo are two very, very powerful lookup combinations for your documents. This is by far my favorite, just for speed, efficiency, and maintainability. Only have to maintain one formula for all of these. So our search key is what the array formula will be using. It's the reference that it's looking for. It's the one thing. It's the piece of data that changes throughout this. Everything else stays the same. And then what you do next is come out in front of the formula, type in array formula, parentheses, come to the end, close it, hit enter, boom. You'll notice this is the only cell that has a formula in it now. The rest of these are just blank, but they're showing the sprite that we wanted them to. That's the power of the array formula now. You saw how fast that loaded to. It's kind of weird how fast that is in comparison to an index match, especially over a large range of data. So that is the power of the array formula when pairing it with the Vlookup. And this can be used with Countif, Sumif, a wide range of the formulas that I'm going over here today, in reference to the array formula. So a general rule of thumb for the array formula: the array part is always going to be referring to the lookup indicator or the search key, the piece of information that changes for every one of these cells. It's not going to be used for the range or the index, things that are going to stay the same throughout the lookup. So keep that in mind when you're looking for, or when you're using array formulas. It's something that's kind of tripped me up in the past, and that's kind of why I was hesitant to use it a lot of the time. But I've become more comfortable just through using it. So that'll do it for the lookup functions and formulas. I think that's a a very good foundation to get you going on any piece of automation that you would like to apply to your league documents going forward. I think just about all of my documents only use those for lookups and such. So it's a pretty good base to work off of. Next, we're going to move on to the error handling. These two are also very prominent. Very good for robust documents. A lot of times it can be a bit of an eyesore when you see a formula that doesn't work and it just has the red tick mark and NA. It doesn't look good when you see that, and that's usually because the error handling case structure around those formulas isn't good or isn't set up. So an if statement allows you to specify a logical expression that would otherwise return only a true or a false value, and then you can have two scenarios to be carried out depending on what the value of that function or of that expression is. So if, this is just a basic example, we're going to go if G2 is equal to Bulbasaur, the value that I want, the function or action I want carried out, if it's true, I want it to be equal to O2. But if it's false, I want it to be blank. It didn't work. I wonder if it's because, no. Can I just not see it? Yep, I just couldn't see it. Okay, it did work. It did work. Okay. The way that I had my formatting here just didn't show up very well. So now I could change that to say that this is equal to Bulba. It's not Bulbasaur anymore, so now it's blank. So that's a very basic example of the if statement. You could say that if it's not Bulbasaur, I want you to show me Squirtle instead. So let's say it's, go back to Bulba, or Blue, and now it's showing me Squirtle. So that's a very basic example of a if statement, but you can extrapolate this and expand upon them. And even you could have if statements inside of if statements if you really wanted to. So it can turn into a rabbit hole very quickly, and it's something where if you do end up doing something like that, what you can do to help yourself keep track of your own code is you can expand your function box up top here, and then to create a new line, it's Alt-Enter, and you can do that to kind of, separate your code out, if you will. So, oh, didn't mean to do what I just did. Oh, I just hit tab, so I went to the next cell. Okay. So, that is the if statement. Moving on to the if error. So, I've kind of got an example already drawn up, and this is what I was talking about by the error case, the NA with the little red tick mark. This occurs when you have an error with your function where the function breaks because it wasn't able to find a match that it was looking for, or parameters were entered incorrectly, or the reference isn't valid. There's a number of reasons why a formula wouldn't work here. The if error gives you two parameters. It gives you your value, which is your formula, or the expressions you have that you want to protect, and the value of error is just a blanket to put over your function in case you run into something like this. So this formula right now, I told it that my search key is A9. I want to search for Zarude inside of this range G2, and if it's found, I want to display the black and white sprite of Zarude. Zarude isn't in this reference, so it couldn't find Zarude, so it gave me an error. So to fix this, to illustrate the if error function, I'm just going to click on my formula here. You can click on it by clicking the function up there, or you can press escape and double click in the cell here to get your function. Either way is fine. I like working up here just because it kind of helps me view this as more of a visual and kind of keeps it cleaner in my eyes, or more organized for my thinking, my thought process. So I'm going to surround this with an if error statement. This becomes my value. I'm going to hit comma, and if the Pokemon does not, if the value, in this case, if the Pokemon doesn't exist in the range, but it could be many different things depending on what your formula that you're trying to protect is looking for. I'm going to say, if the root isn't there, display the text Pokemon not found. and then close and hit enter. Now, it didn't find Zarood, but it shows me something that kind of explains what the error was and why it happened. Alright, next we're going to move on to the data manipulation formulas. Starting off with sort. This is used a lot when you're trying to sort standings or MVP standings for Pokemon or teams. This is asking for 3 different parameters, but it could be as many as 5. It can go up to 5 or 7 or however many sort columns you want to have and rules that you want to have for those. But it's asking for the range, the column that you want to sort by, and how you want it to be sorted from greatest to least or least to greatest, essentially. So to give you a basic example of this, we are going to organize the list of Pokemon in alphabetical order. So we're going to type in our sort function. We'll highlight our range that we would like to sort, comma. Our sort column it starts from 0 to 1, and you could even specify the range that you want to be sorted. So I could type in, for the sort column, I could type in G2 to G17 again and refer to the same thing as if I just put in 1, because this is the first column in that range. So I'm going to say 1 and is ascending. So because this is a string set of string data, it's always going to sort by alphabetical order. If I were to highlight a number, let's say a cell of ranges or a range of cells that were only like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I selected those, I could sort by, greatest to least or least to greatest, as in like 1 to 10 or 10 to 1. So each data type has its own inherent way it can be sorted with this, and it's just up to you to select which one of those 2 ways you want it to be sorted. So is ascending, so that means if it's going from, I forget, I'm just gonna hit false here because I can't remember if is ascending is always going to say like it's going from A to Z but starting with Z on top, or if it's going from Z to A with Z on bottom. I kind of get confused with that sometimes, but inside here I put false just for it's easy to to see what it means, because you can read it false, true, whatever. Another way you can distinguish it is putting 0 for false or 1 for true. So we're gonna say 0, hit enter, and okay. So is ascending false means that it's going to sort from the bottom to the top, or from least to greatest with the least on top. So if you change our formula to is ascending true, it should go Bulbasaur or Blastoise at the top, and go down to Wartortle. So you could do that with numbers to show that the greatest number on top to the smallest number on bottom, and that's how the sort function works. Moving on to filters. This is a way to remove data from a reference that you don't really want to have in there. So a basic example of this is we're going to provide a range and our condition, which is going to be Charizard, to sort Charizard out of this range. So we're going to type in our filter function, select our range, and type Charizard. Close that, hit enter. Row count 16, column count 1. Condition. I didn't totally explain the condition. Okay. G2 to G17 equal to Charizard. And I still didn't define my function or my formula correctly for what I wanted to do. So instead, I said filter everything that isn't equal, filter everything out that isn't equal to Charizard. Now I want to say filter everything out that is equal to Charizard, so it'll display everything else but Charizard. So instead of doing the equal sign, I'll do the shortcut for not equals and hit enter, and this will display everything except for Charizard. So it goes directly from Charmeleon to Charizard, Mega Charizard X. That is the filter function. Moving on to round. This is something that can help clean up your data, especially for standings if you have ratios that you're calculating and using to round or sort data with. The best example that I can come up with is kills per game, or KD ratio, for a certain Pokemon in a standings or MVP tracking setting. So the formula here is asking for the values and the places that you want them to be rounded to. So we're going to type in our formula here, round. We're going to type in our values here, comma, and I want them to be sorted to the nearest tenths place. So if I wanted to have no decimals, I would put 0, but I want to have 1 decimal, so I'm going to hit 1 and hit enter, and an array value cannot be found. The reason this is because the round, so I'm going to have to use the array formula here. The round function is only specifying a certain cell, a specific cell. To use it the way that I attempted to properly, you need to have the array formula in front of it. And now it'll round that set of data with one formula. So now it rounded 1.3657 up to 1.4. Rounded 4.2 to just stay at 4.2, and it moved 6.87 up to 6.9. That is the round function. Next, we're going to move on to split, and this is something that's a little bit tricky and something that is best used with the Porygon bot, in my opinion. One of the features of the Porygon bot is to be able to display game data in a CSV format or a comma delimited format, where it'll display the Pokemon name, the kill, followed by a comma. It'll show the kills, comma, and then the deaths, comma. And then what you can do is you can copy that in, and it'll look something similar to this, minus this little asterisk here. And I will show you why this asterisk is here in a second. So this is the basic formula that Porygon bot can display data that makes it extremely easy for your moderators to upload data. So you can make it so there's a field where all they have to do is copy that output from Porygon in Discord and paste it into the sheet, and then the sheet will go and sort out the kills and all the fun magic stuff behind the scenes automatically after you get that all set up. So the split is looking for the text. The delimiter, what you want the text to be broken up by, or where you want the text to be broken up by. The split by each function is a little tricky, so it'll say allows you to use multiple characters as a delimiter instead of as a whole. So what that means is, let's say if you only have one character as your delimiter, this split by each doesn't matter. It's negligible because you only have one. But if you have 2 characters in there, let's say I have a comma and an asterisk, it'll use both of those. So it'll as a separation point. So, and then this remove function at the end says that if you have, let's say, a Meowth or Meowth, it had a blank for the kills and it got 1 death. So what the remove function here does is that blank inside there, which essentially is there's nothing in between the 2 delimiters, will get removed. So to show you that for an example, real quick, I will use the Squirtle and Meowth. So I'll type in my formula, split, my text is these 2, and I have a suspicion that I'll need to use the array formula again. But first off, we'll just use the comma, and you have to display the delimiter character inside of quotes in order for it to search, because this is splitting a text value, and so you need to give it a text value for the delimiter. And you can display or specify things as text by surrounding them with quotes. Split by each, we'll leave it as true. It doesn't mean anything right now because there's only one character as our delimiter. And then remove empty text, true, to display what this means. So I believe, oops, if I surround this with an array formula, yep, that did it. So now you see that there is only one chunk of data here in the Meowth. There was only one kill or death. So because the empty space was in the kills, it didn't register the kills value there, and instead it moved the deaths one column over. But if you look at the squirrel, we specified that we wanted it split up by commas, so it split up the Pokemon name, the kills, and deaths all by the commas in there. And that's how you can use the split. Now, to display what I meant by the split by each, we will split all of this using the same formula. So I'll go with split. Our text is all of these. Our delimiter will say it can be the comma or the asterisk, comma, split by each true. So I want that to say split by the comma or the asterisk. And then the remove empty spaces will say false, just to show you what this option would do. Now we have to add the array formula, hit enter, there is our data. So even though BaLLHaWK had its data separated by a comma and an asterisk, because we said that we want you to split by each the comma and the asterisk, it still worked just the same as Charmander being split by 2 commas. And because we specified false by remove empty text, this blank value between the 2 commas gets its own cell here. So that is the split function. Moving on to the concatenate. This is kind of niche and has limited usability, but it's kind of nice to have and know how to use. Basically what the concatenate does, what it means is you can attach 2 strings together in one main string. So to highlight this, I will show how to concatenate the Pokedex number to the end of the Pokemon name. And I'll use two different ways to show it. There's a formula, and then there's the shortcut way. I'm going to show the formula first. So we'll type out concatenate. Our string 1 is G2, comma, space, comma, that. And that is our concatenated string. So it combined BaLLHaWK plus a space plus the black-white sprite number. Now, that's the formula method. Very good, very easy to use. A lot of times it's better to use that way for debug purposes, so people that may not be familiar with shortcuts can see what this is doing. But if you're familiar, you know you're really going to be the only one using it, or you know the people that are going to be using it know the shortcuts. You can use it this way for ease of coding. So concatenate, we're just going to type in our equal sign equals G2 ampersand. So this ampersand is the same thing as the formula and the comma. So type in our space ampersand H2, and it's the exact same result. This one is much easier and simpler to code. This one is better for visibility and commenting your work, so to speak. So it's really a matter of preference which one you use. They both do the same thing. Yeah, just so you know. That does it for the data manipulation section. Now we will move on to the last section and basically media, I guess is the best way to describe it. The image function is pretty cool. This is what I'm using over here in our example data to display these sprites. I'm using the image function. So what does the image function do? Well, it allows you to give a web URL. It has to be a valid URL. And it'll display the image in that URL. So to prove to you that these are valid URLs, I'm going to, Control Z. I'm going to copy that, come up to my browser, type in the URL, and see that this is a valid web image. I'll head back to my document now. And let's see here. So all you have to do to display this image is basically just show this text URL and inside of the image function, and it'll display that image. So let's go ahead and display that now. Equals image, our text URL, so text meaning you have to surround it with the quotes, refer to this cell. Where did my formula go? Well, I'm just going to re-enter that image, our text URL. Why is it doing that? I guess we have to have the URL in there first. Or I guess I have to just manually type out the cell there. Or one thing I could do is I could just copy the link and then paste it in there. And then hit enter, and then it'll display the image so that it fits inside of that cell. Now, there's an asterisk here on mode because there are a bunch of different modes that you can use. You could have it so it resizes the image to fit the cell, maintains the same aspect ratio, and does not distort the image. This is the default. If I type in my formula exactly the way I see in here, it's in mode 1. You could have it set to mode 2, which will stretch the image to fit the entire cell. So this one will distort the image, as you see there, to fill up that entire cell. Mode 3 maintains the original size even when the image is cropped. So each one of these cells has their own set pixel size. As you could have seen in the link, it showed the pixel size, so it maintains that pixel count even though that cell is getting cropped out, or that image is getting cropped out by the size of the cell. And lastly, mode 4 is for customization. You could select mode 4 and then go into the height. Let's say I want to show 50 pixels by 50 pixels tall by 75 pixels wide. This will display the image with those parameters, or I could say 32 by 32, and there you go. So you can kind of play with the way that these images are displayed, however you like. Last and not least is the hyperlink. This is something that I've started to play around with just recently for navigation purposes in my documents. The hyperlink is good for web links, for replays. It is also good for creating a table of contents within your document. So a couple of the ways I like to use it is you give it your URL. This could be a web link, or it could be a link to a cell within your document. And to get a link to a cell within your document, it's as simple as clicking on a cell, right click, head down to get link to this cell. Now you got the link copied and paste. Oops. And there you go. So I could come over to Countif, type in that link, click on that link, and it brings me right back to the hyperlink page. So that's kind of how that works. So let's create a table of contents for this document as our example. So you could do that with I guess the other way that you can use this is for replays. You could have a column here that has your team name 1, team name 2, and the replay link, and you could, for your link label, you could use the concatenate function that we just learned and concatenate team 1 space team 2, and then your replay is then labeled as team 1 versus team 2, that sort of thing. So but we're gonna create a table of contents quick to wrap up this video, and say that, let's see here, we've got our labels. So we've got our cover page, we've got index match, we had Vlookup, Hlookup. What next? We had indirect. We had, I didn't spell that right, indirect. We had arrays, Countif, Sumif, Arrayformula, if error, sort, filter, not realtor, filter. And then we also had the round, split, concatenate, image, and our hyperlink. Now, the next step is to go through in each one of these pages, go and highlight a cell and get the link for that page, paste it in there, and we'll do that for all of these pages real quick. And I'll pause it here and continue back once I got that done. Alright, so now I got all of our links for those pages. Now I can come over here and create my hyperlink formulas. So these are going to be the labels for all the links. These are the links themselves. So now we're going to type in hyperlink and our URLs, or just singular URL, and our link label. Close that, hit enter. Now we've got a link to our cover page. Boom, easy as that. So this is nice because now you can take this, cut it, go over to your overview, and let's just put it over here, paste, and there are that is our table of contents. So creating a table of contents and labeling your replays as they come out is the best way that I can think of to use the hyperlink function as of now. So that'll do it for the Formulas 101 video and the first how-to video for the DLC. Feel free to leave a comment in the video below, with any questions or concerns or ideas or suggestions for future videos. And if you're in the DLC, hey, let me know what you thought of the video. Let me know what you think I can improve upon. What else should be covered? And thanks for tuning in. I hope this helps you guys out. And good luck in your Google Sheets endeavors. Thanks. Talk to you later.